Trevor Lane, Lakers Nation. Great timing, Trevor. Great timing.
It was it was fortunate timing for sure on the heels of the JJ Redick hiring, everything else we've got going on. Whew, it is a busy time in Lakerland, that's for sure.
What are your thoughts on the hiring, but not only that, the reporting around the hiring?
Yeah, I thought it was a little weird. I mean, just all the back and forth. Woj versus Shams. At some point, maybe 20 years from now, we're going to get a 30 for 30 on this. It's going to be like the Monday Night Wars in the wrestling world. We're going to get something like that. So it was interesting that, Woj was on the Dan Hurley side. Shams was saying, no, it was Reddick, and them kind of going back and forth after each other. That was certainly fun to watch. But I think the hire overall is where we knew we would almost certainly end up. I thought there was a week there where we thought Dan Hurley, there was a real good chance that it was going to wind up being him. Obviously, that didn't come to fruition. It's for the 7-week stretch. The remainder of the time, we all believed that it would ultimately, regardless of how long it took, be JJ Redick. And there's pros and cons to that. I mean, he has no head coaching experience. That's a red flag. That's something that he's going to have to overcome. How is he going to navigate that locker room? How is he going to overcome the perceptions that he's, LeBron's guy from the podcast and all that stuff? So there's a lot of cause for concern here. But I think the bottom line is also a very, very smart basketball mind. And the belief is that he will be able to overcome those things. And given the market right now, I'm not upset about the hire. I think it'll be interesting to see how he navigates some of the challenges ahead of him. But the Lakers are swinging for the fences here, and they think he can be the guy for them long term.
Yeah, I don't think JJ wanted it out that he was the guy while he was at ESPN. Is there a chance that he was just the guy all along?
I think that he was the guy in the very, very early going. I think that he became the guy very quickly. I know Rob Pelinka met with him at the NBA draft combine, and so that was probably where that all kind of started. I do think the interest in Dan Hurley was real. Now, did every member of the front office want Dan Hurley? I'm sure there is some variance in those opinions, but Dan Hurley, that week or so there, from my conversations, the Lakers were very much hoping that he would become the guy for them and would build a program and do all of that. But obviously, he chose a different path.
Did you find the media run that Dan Hurley went on, like after denying a job? Like usually when somebody denies a job, they don't go on like every show to talk about it right after.
Yeah, it was a little bit strange, but then when you take a step back and you look at the situation, so if you're Dan Hurley, you're going into this situation, it is a no-lose situation. There's only positive coming out of this. No matter what happens, it's only positive for him because he's either going to get more money to stay in UConn because they're going to go, well, damn, the Lakers are involved now. We'd better up our offer. He's going to get a bunch of money to go coach the Lakers. And in the meantime, all of this process is going to put his name out there because let's face it, there are people who are NBA fans that are not college basketball fans that don't watch college basketball. There are people who are now talking about Dan Hurley that maybe didn't know much about Dan Hurley ahead of this situation. So him putting himself out there doing that media tour, I think it's just continuing to push his stock that much higher. Again, regardless of what he did, it was all going to be good from his perspective. He's going to get more money and he's going to get his name out there a ton and be seen as one of the top coaches in the country definitively at both the pro and the college level now because it was, hey, the Lakers want this guy. So it was a win-win scenario for Dan Hurley. And so I understand why he would want to put the cherry on top and go talk to everybody and make sure he stays in that news cycle for another few days to a week.
What have you made of the JJ LeBron podcast journey? Ramona Shelburne talked about on ESPN. She didn't use the word coincidence, but it sounded like she was saying it was coincidence. These two start a podcast, and then all of a sudden, JJ's the coach of the Los Angeles Lakers.
I mean, it had to have some kind of an impact, right? There's no way that LeBron and JJ are sitting around talking basketball for hours and that had no effect on whether or not he was going to become the head coach of the Los Angeles Lakers. Now, LeBron has done everything to distance himself from this situation. He's made it very, very clear through his agent, through various people that he was not involved in the decision-making process, that this was not a decision that he made, that it was the Lakers' decision and all of this. And he kind of has to at this point, right? Because if he doesn't, JJ's DOA if he comes in as, hey, LeBron hired this guy, right? That's not going to go over that well in the locker room. That's going to make things a bit tough and a bit awkward for JJ from the get-go. So LeBron distancing himself from the situation makes a lot of sense. But the fact that he's been sitting around for hours upon hours talking basketball with LeBron, going over philosophies, talking about how he sees the game compared to how LeBron sees the game, that had to be some kind of factor in the Lakers' interest and ultimately him getting that job.
Do you think the pod continues throughout the season? I don't think
I don't,
so. I don't think so, Trevor.
No, I don't think so because especially with the tampering rules, right? Like players talking about other players, like that's a little bit more of a gray area. But like if JJ Redick, now is the head coach of the Lakers, goes on a podcast and raves about a guy who's going to be a free agent the following summer, the NBA is gonna raise some eyebrows at that. So I think it would be pretty difficult to do that now.
What are your biggest concerns when it comes to JJ being the new head coach of the Los Angeles Lakers?
It's just it's the unknown, really, and the unknown is scary, right? But that's human nature. Sometimes we fear what we don't know, and we don't know what JJ is as a head coach. He could be, I mean, the ceiling is low. I'm sorry, the ceiling is high, the floor is low. He could be really bad. We don't know. He could also be great. We really have no idea. And so it's how is he going to handle all these situations? There is an intense spotlight. Even Darvin Ham, who is cool as a cucumber in most situations, even he admitted that it got to him, that it was bothering him. He said, "My goodness, we're living and dying with every game." Well, yeah, that's Laker fandom. But how does JJ manage that? How does he manage a locker room, given that he hasn't done that before? What does that look like? What happens when a player or two get frustrated with their minutes, with their role in January, in February, during the dog days of the season? How does he handle those situations? And then, of course, in game, the X's and O's. How many times did we see Lakers fans saying, "Oh my gosh, Darvin Ham won't call a timeout," and getting frustrated with that, with his in-game management? There's going to be moments where basketball is a very, very fast game where JJ may not make the right decision on the fly and he'll get scrutinized for it. How does he respond to that? How does he manage things in the moment? I think that's going to be critical as well. So there's a lot. This is a steep learning curve. There's a reason why you don't often see coaches step into this role with no experience like this. It's not going to be easy, but the Lakers believe that he's going to be able to catch on real quick here.
Staying cool, calm, collective is such an important thing when it comes to coaching. And obviously, when you hear JJ talk, he's a brilliant basketball mind. But to your point, like we have seen him get emotional on ESPN, like a little too emotional. And I hope that doesn't carry over to this team because you have to stay even keel. You can't get too high. You can't get too low, especially over the course of an 82-game season.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, you look at Phil Jackson, right? The way that he managed games. Now, Phil is, the greatest coach of all time. I'm not trying to set the bar too high here, but he was a guy who stayed very even keeled throughout the games. There are coaches who are more demonstrative, and I mean, Dan Hurley certainly being one, right? But JJ's ability to project calm onto the team and confidence, I think, is the biggest thing onto the team. That's going to be important. You want the players to believe in what it is that you're saying. And that's what happened with Darvin Ham this past season. I think he hit a point with his rotations, trying some bizarre stuff, some of the lineups where the players just said, you know what? Are we sure this guy is the guy that's going to lead us to where we want to go? I don't know if he's making the right choices here. JJ is going to have to maintain that buy-in and maintain that confidence in his own decision-making. So, like I said, it's a steep challenge, but the Lakers believe that he can do it.
All right, Sam Cassell just wins the championship. It feels like Duds is going to stay with the Mavs. They're talking about they need an experienced staff with the assistant coaches. I mean, who could they bring in at this point?
Yeah, Scott Brooks is a name that's out there who's an experienced head coach, and I think that's absolutely critical. You get somebody who has experience being a head coach in the NBA that can give JJ that kind of support. That's going to be important for the team. That's also going to be important for JJ and his own ability to navigate this first season. So Scott Brooks is an interesting name that's out there. Other names have been out there like James Borrego, although the word is that he probably will not try to take a lateral move. In fact, most teams will push back against that. If an assistant coach is under contract with a team and they're going to take a head coaching job, the team they're under contract with will not stand in the way of that. Nobody wants to be that team that tries to stop somebody from advancing their career. If it's a lateral move, though, an assistant says, I want to go be an assistant somewhere else, that's where the incumbent team has a little bit more ground to stand on and say, you've got a contract with us. So I would be surprised if it winds up being James Borrego as an assistant, but his name's out there. There's a number of other guys. It is interesting. The Lakers, they've gotten a lot of coaches paid this summer when you look at things. They were interested in Jason Kidd. The Mavs said, "Oh, no, let's give him an extension." We're interested in Jared Dudley. The Mavs say, "No, we want to keep him. We want to keep him." Same thing with Ty Lue. They're interested in him. The Clippers, nope, let's give him an extension. Dan Hurley.
Right.
The Lakers have been very generous to the coaching community this summer, but I do think they're going to try to round out. The coaching staff with as much experience as they can find, as well as a few other names sprinkled in there. One that we've heard who has no experience, but I love Rajon Rondo.
Oh, yeah. Because he has the respect of LeBron, and he has obviously the respect of JJ as well.
100%. I mean, he was known for being a big piece of organizing the Lakers offense in 2020. And he's just known as being one of the brightest basketball minds. But aside from Rondo, I expect everybody else that joins the staff, and I'm not certain Rondo's going to join, but I expect everybody else to be experienced to try to give JJ that kind of support system in place.
Is that hearsay when it comes to Rondo, or they've had conversations, or what's the deal with that?
I haven't heard anything specific like from the Lakers or anything about them having conversations about Rondo, but this is, I mean, I've been hearing Rondo should be a Lakers assistant for, it's got to have been a year now. People have been bringing that up, various people in different circles saying, hey, this is something they should do. So it's a name that's been kind of floating around for a while now, and he's popped up in a few different reports, but again, I can't specifically say anything I've heard from the team suggested that Rondo is going to be that guy, but it's interesting that he's a name that's continually popped up in connection to the Lakers for the last year or so.
Let's say JJ does a great job, right? Perfect job. He's a great coach. Is this roster good enough to win a championship? And what is the archetype of player that you think the Lakers need to add to this roster to make them legit, keep them legit title contenders?
So I think that the biggest problem facing this Lakers team, aside from injuries last season, they lost the second most games due to injury than any team in the NBA. In terms of the second most amount of players missing games due to injury, they had Gabe Vincent out for much of the season, Jared Vanderbilt out for much of the season. LeBron and AD were healthy for much of the year, though, so that mitigates that to some degree. I do think that they've got to find more two-way players, and the problem is all 30 teams are saying that right now. We need two-way players.
Two-way players and shooting. I feel like every team needs, right?
Exactly. Yep. Every team's looking for those things. Right. So, and every team wants to trade their first round pick right now. So it's a difficult market to be in where every team is looking for the same stuff that you are. But ultimately, the Lakers had too many one-way players on this team. You had guys like Jared Vanderbilt. You had Cam Reddish. You had some of these guys who are, Jackson Hayes, these guys who can give you a little bit on the defensive side or can help you out a little bit on the boards, but they're not going to give you anything on the other side of the ball. Then you have guys like D'Angelo Russell, who's going to give you all offense, but he's going to be a negative on the defensive side. So they had too many guys who were one-way players. They need to find more two-way guys who can give you something on both sides of the basketball. I'd like to see them get a true big, a physical big, and I'm talking about somebody who is at least Anthony Davis size, if not bigger. Because you put Christian Wood on the floor with AD is still the center. You put Jackson Hayes on the floor with AD is still the center. He's the biggest guy on the floor. He's going to be tasked with defending Jokic, whoever it is. The Lakers need a big physical presence that they haven't had for a while now. They had Marc Gasol a few years back. They brought back Dwight Howard for a second run or a third run, I guess, with them. But they need that kind of guy that can step in and in the right moments take some of that burden off of Anthony Davis. I think that's going to be important for them, in addition to finding two-way players across the board, which, again, it's a tall task to get all of that done. But that's what the front office is going to have to try to do.
Trevor, you even spoke to Brook Lopez being available. You're talking about the Lakers needing a big. Is that a guy that could help the Lakers, or is that even realistic?
No. So I was throwing that out there just kind of to see what the reaction was from Lakers fans. But
you got to do that sometimes, Trevor. You got to
yeah. But that type of play, that archetype could certainly be something that could help them. Specifically now that Anthony Davis, he doesn't shoot the three that much anymore. And when he does, he doesn't shoot it well. So ideally, if you're going to put a 5 on the floor with him, it's somebody that can shoot the 3, that Brook Lopez archetype. The problem is we've got the new CBA. And with the new CBA, the salary cap tiers, if you're above the first tier, which both the Bucks and the Lakers are, you're not allowed to take back more salary than you send out in a trade. which effectively means in a one-to-one trade, the Bucks and Lakers can't trade with each other because one team would have to take back more salary than the other unless you find two exactly equal contracts, which is pretty rare. So they would have to get a third team involved that they could dump salary on to make it work. It would be extremely tricky to try to make something like that happen. But that type of player, I think, is something the Lakers should be looking for. And maybe that's something that they can try to find in the draft. There's some guys, Kel'el Ware, can Zach Edey shoot the three? He showed it a little bit at the draft combine. DeRon Holmes. There's some guys out there that can maybe fit that bill. But that type of player would fit well with this Lakers team. But specifically getting Brook Lopez would be extremely difficult because of that new CBA.
Trae Young drops an hourglass emoji on X. What are your thoughts?
Man, if I was an NBA player this time of year, just for fun, I'd tweet out the eyeball emojis or whatever just to see what happens. But it's interesting that this is the same emoji that LeBron used right before the trade deadline this past year when he wanted to see moves get made. This gets done on the heels of JJ Redick, and Trae's been connected to the Lakers in the past. To me, it's nothing until it's something. I don't expect the Lakers to go down that path. JJ himself has talked on his podcast with LeBron, who agreed with him fully that in today's NBA, you need 1 or 2 stars and a total of 7 or 8 guys that can really play in order to have success in this league. So I don't see the Lakers going for a 3-star build, but it is interesting that that's what Trae Young did on social media. Again, who knows? Maybe he sent it out and he was laughing maniacally while he did it, saying, "Watch the reaction to this." But it's something to keep an eye on because they have been connected to Trae Young in the past, although he's no longer a Clutch Sports client. So maybe some of that connection has diminished.
It feels like the way JJ looks at the modern game, the way we all look at the modern game, it's not really trending in the way that Trae Young plays with the heliocentric offense, a guy that could get targeted on defense. So that would bring a lot of and I think Trae is super talented. Like the way he could pass the ball at his size and score at his size and put up the numbers he does. But it doesn't feel like the ideal fit with JJ's philosophy, even though we don't know the full philosophy yet.
Yeah, agreed. Now, JJ has talked a bit, or at least some of the reporting suggested, and I've heard this as well, that he wants to use LeBron off ball more. And if you're going to do that, and if we don't know the status of D'Angelo Russell, if he could be, who knows, maybe he goes to Orlando and he just jumps into their cap space. We don't know what's going to happen there. He is a player option on his deal, has until June 29th to decide on that. You would still need another ball handler, especially if LeBron is going to shift into more of an off-ball role. That said, we've heard for years that LeBron's going to play more off-ball, and when push comes to shove, the ball tends to find its way into his hands. Literally, since they first added Dennis Schroeder, it was, we're going to take LeBron off ball. That was in 2021. And they've had that goal of continuing to do that. And in some ways it has shifted a bit, but it sounds like they want to make it more of a dramatic thing. So maybe they could use another ball handler, but I do agree. Trae's inability to defend, needing the ball in his hands, it's not a perfect fit. I think he's a better fit than the Russell Westbrook fit, but that's a very, very low bar. That was about as bad of a fit as you could imagine. So I think he's a better fit than that, but you're right. It's not a perfect fit. And if I'm the Lakers, especially given how much it would cost to get him, I'm probably looking elsewhere.
So Bill Simmons had an interesting post about Bronny James that he thinks the Celtics should take him with a 30th pick. I mean, how realistic is it? What are the chances that Bronny actually goes first round?
Slim, I would think. I don't.
Is it 0?
I don't think it's 0. I don't think it's 0. I think it's possible, but I think what you've seen Clutch Sports trying to do is push back on the idea, wholeheartedly push back on the idea that landing Bronny has anything to do with having a shot at LeBron James. They've done everything they can to cut the tether there between those two and make it clear that that's not the case. They even said if the Lakers draft Bronny, LeBron could still potentially leave in free agency. So they're doing everything they can to dissuade teams from thinking they have a shot at LeBron if they draft Bronny. And it makes sense. We're seeing this now more and more in the NBA draft, where agencies are more concerned with where a player lands and what the fit is than their draft spot. That's become a thing, to the point where now you've got guys in the second round that are telling teams, please don't draft me. I would rather go be a free agent and get to pick my destination. That's exactly what happened with Austin Reeves. So I think that Clutch Sports has certain landing spots they want for Bronny. Phoenix is one of them. They worked out with Phoenix, the Lakers being another one. But I would be surprised. I think for a team to look at Bronny and say, this is a guy we want to burn a first-round draft pick on, they would have to be thinking, it gives us a shot at LeBron James. And Clutch is doing what they can to try to push back against that. I do think his absolute floor is 55 to the Lakers. That may be his most likely landing spot too, but I can't imagine a world where he's there at 55 and the Lakers don't take him. Could another team earlier in the second round take him? Potentially. I think he's a legitimate NBA talent, but Clutch is really trying to drive home. Only draft him if you believe in him and want to develop him. Otherwise, stay away because it's not going to get you LeBron James. And that's the message they're trying to send. So we'll see if they're successful. I would be surprised if a team decided to burn that bridge, so to speak, upset the agency and upset Clutch Sports by drafting Bronny simply to try to get LeBron, which is kind of what Bill Simmons is talking about, or simply to try to use him as leverage in a situation rather than draft him because they genuinely are interested in him as a player.
Do you feel like Bronny getting drafted by the Lakers at 55 is the best scenario for everyone involved? Bronny, Lakers, Lakers fan, Lakers front office?
I think it is. I think that there would be a commitment from the Lakers to develop him. And again, some of that might be, hey, LeBron has said it's not about playing with Bronny anymore, but certainly wouldn't hurt, right? In terms of hanging on to him. But I do think it's a good situation for him to be in. He'd be at home, be near family. Obviously he would be playing with his dad, which is something that there's pros and cons to that, certainly. But we've seen the Lakers develop players. They've typically traded those players fairly quickly once they find a star that they want. But we know the Lakers can develop talent. We've seen them do it in the past, and they have a pretty good track record in the draft overall, even with Jalen Hood-Schifino not really hitting so far from last season. But I do think it's a good situation for him. It's one where he'll be given plenty of opportunities to develop, potentially in the G League. And then they can go from there, because I do think it's critical that wherever he goes, it's with a team that is invested in developing him and his future.
Trevor, great stuff. You're always welcome back on the show. Where can we find you? Social media, podcasts, everywhere else.
Yeah, you can find me on X at Trevor_Lane, and then over on the Lakers Nation YouTube channel, youtube.com/LakersNation. The Lakers Nation podcast, you can find on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts. And thank you for having me. This was a blast.
Anytime. You're always welcome back on the show, and talk soon.
Sounds good.